Dear Bethel family, I have been reading through Deuteronomy, which initially may not seem to be the most appealing of Bible books to read. There are a lot of heavy passages concerning warnings for turning away from God, and some of the laws seem quite archaic. Reading Deuteronomy might make one feel they are in a different world. Nonetheless, if I could describe the overall theme in Deuteronomy with one phrase, it would be this: finding joy in God. Let me highlight some passages that speak of joy with the hope that your joy can be kindled. Deuteronomy 6 verse 5, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might." Our God is a God worth loving. He's beautiful, perfect being, full of grace and mercy. And Deuteronomy 5 reiterates the Ten Commandments. And just before it, we read how God made a covenant with his people, spoke face to face with them, and brought them out of Egypt. And Deuteronomy 6 verse 4 says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one." So after these descriptions of who God is, after these descriptions of what God has done, we're called to love him. In other words, we are to find our supreme joy and delight in him, and that joy finds expression in obeying his commandments. Deuteronomy 12 verse 7, "There you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you will rejoice, you and your households, in all that you undertake, in which the Lord your God has blessed you." This chapter is speaking of worshiping and making sacrifices at the place God chooses. As the Israelite worshiper gave tithes, contributions, made vows, gave free will offerings, and gave the firstborn of the flock, they had a feast before the Lord. There is feasting, that there is joy, because one is one with the Lord, and that feasting points to feasting on God through faith. Deuteronomy 12 verse 18, "You shall eat them before the Lord in the place the Lord your God will choose, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God." Here it's speaking of eating part of the offering they gave to the Lord. They enjoyed what they gave to the Lord. Deuteronomy 14 verse 22, "You shall tithe all the yield of your seed that comes from the field, and if the way is too long for you so that you are not able to carry the tithe, then you shall turn it into money, and bind up the money in your hand, and go to the place the Lord your God chooses, and spend money for whatever you desire, oxen or sheep or wine or strong drink, whatever your appetites crave. And you shall eat before the Lord your God, and rejoice, you and your household." God gives his people permission to buy good meat, good wine, to enjoy as an act of worship. Deuteronomy 16, 10 through 12, "Then you shall keep the Feast of Weeks to the Lord your God with the tribute of a free will offering. You shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your son and your daughter, your male and female servant, the Levite who is within your towns, the sojourner, the fatherless, and widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt." Here there is joy of worship, coupled with the joy of being with other people, even people quite different from one another. There are many more in this book, but I will do just one more passage that may not be as obvious, but it's important nonetheless. In Deuteronomy 28, God promises to reward faithful obedience to his commandments by enabling many things to go well in the land he is giving them. Heaven and earth are called to be witness against Israel should they fail to obey the commands. And these promises that things will go well in their land are general promises for Israelites, directly tied to them living in that land. But there's something amazing that often gets overlooked, and it's that these earthly benefits are not really the main thing. Deuteronomy 30 verse 20 says, "For God is your life. God is your length of days." As God blessed them with life and length of days in the promised land, they were supposed to think about how God was their best and ultimate dwelling place. Having a relationship with God himself is better than anything in this world. God was the better promised land. What fellowship we have with our God through Jesus Christ. Because of his shed blood, we are reconciled to God and seated at his table. We have a communion with Jesus all of our days. And there is joy and feasting before him. The Holy Spirit has united us to Christ, so that Jesus is bone of our bones and flesh of our flesh. And we feast upon Jesus through our faith. We lay hold of him, we take him in, and we rejoice. Psalm 23 says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And so the Christian experience is, even in the valley, feasting with joy at the table. On the next 2 Sundays, we will celebrate communion. We have no animal sacrifice to bring because Jesus was the perfect and final sacrifice. He was the perfect one offered, and he is the food we eat and drink, and he is strong drink indeed. So let us come to worship with joy. Let us come to the table with joy. Let us examine our lives and attitudes and see what is sucking away that joy, and then feast through our faith at the table that God has prepared for us in the presence of our enemies. Drink of Christ with an overflowing cup and be filled with joy. I love you and pray for all of you regularly. Goodbye.